0 viewers
at the moment. Well, we just launched. I mean, give a second. It's going to be a rowdy class this morning. I can tell.
Yes, yes. Apparently, they don't know I'm here.
Apparently, we're trying to keep your face right off the screen there. All right, so today's topic is
HomeBase and using it to get more listings.
commission.
more commission, higher commission.
Oh, higher
Okay.
commissions.
Because we've talked about HomeBase in Touch before, right? And what is HomeBase in Touch?
Wait, is it about CDX?
Well, it's our
That was
contact
last
management.
Okay.
It's our contact management tool.
Database.
It's a customer relationship manager. It's designed to help remind you to reach out and prospect people. It's got automated drip stuff in it, so it sends out stuff. It can even mail postcards for you, right?
Right. And I've done that.
And what does that do for you? As I remind
Keeps
myself,
your face
turn off
in
my
front
phone.
of the audience.
Keeps your face in front of the audience and gives you more opportunities to have contacts where you might get appointments, right?
Right.
Once you get the appointment, what's your goal?
Get listed.
Because prospecting's only goal is to
Get
get an appointment, right? To actually sit down and have a conversation. But that conversation's goal is to then convert them to a client, right?
Yeah.
Once you convert them to a client,
Mhm.
how do you make sure that they are happier than they've ever been with anyone else and think you walk on water and built the moon?
This business, just keep in touch.
One of the biggest things is keeping in touch, right?
Well, yes, and not keeping in touch, but immediate response.
Immediate response definitely is helpful, or at least response within whatever you set the expectation is the way I would look at it.
Well, if somebody texts you,
Mhm.
you need to text them right back.
I would think probably.
But you also have to keep that going.
Well, I mean, it's like this summer, I had this guy, he would text me at 10 a.m. and say, I want to see this at 2 p.m.
Mhm.
And so you text him right back and say, check it on.
Okay.
And then, make sure it's okay, text him right back and meet him over there. And at the closing, he said, I didn't know you, but I would recommend you because you are the most responsive person.
This business.
You gotta be responsive.
You gotta be responsive, right?
Yes.
Because people want, and in the day and age of technology, I mean, think of before we had text, people would leave you a message on your tape answering machine and hope that you would call them back within the next couple of days, right?
Yeah.
Because that was kind of the norm for response time. But like you said, if somebody texts you, they expect you to respond immediately. Now, I think the biggest thing that you said is you responded with, I will look into that. You don't have to respond with the answer, just respond.
He knows you got it.
Just recognize the fact that you got it and that you're going to get them what they're looking for. And that usually is enough to satisfy most people. Not everybody, but most people, right? All right. So what is one of the things that we're going to talk about higher commission today, right? So a commission conversation, if I told you that I want to charge 5% on my side, and whatever we pay the buyer is up to the seller, don't care, but I'm going to charge 5% on every one of my listings, what would you think? Come on, be honest.
Good luck.
Good luck. You're never going to sell anything. Are you crazy, right?
No.
Well, in my mind, I'm not, because here's the reality. I mean, in my mind, the reality is that I do believe you should be able to charge more than the average agent if you can prove to the client that you are better than the average agent. Think about if the average, the AIA, right? We know what AIA stands for? Average Idiot Agent. Out there, if the AIA is out there charging 3%, why aren't you charging more than that? How come you're not worth more than that when you actually do something for your client and they don't? Now, I'm being very general and stereotypical, but we've all had those interactions. We've all had those co-op deals where the other side was clearly not as swift as they should be, where we've had the realization, and if you've been in the business for any period of time, you at some point have had the realization that I almost feel bad for the client on the other side because clearly their representation is not as good as my client's, and they probably could have gotten a little better deal, whether they're the buyer or the seller, if they had just had a better negotiator on their side, which, you know, is good for our client, right? But you almost feel bad a little bit. And I could tell you story after story. I had one where we had a buyer, we put in a contract, and the seller accepted it in a multiple offer situation, and the agent and I sat down and calculated about what we thought really where we should have ended up if there actually had been any negotiation, because in this sense there was zero representation and no negotiation whatsoever. They just accepted the contract. Now, this was an initial offer where there weren't multiple offers to begin with.
Not a year late.
And so they were, that was me.
Ooh.
There weren't multiple offers, and they just accepted it straight out. But the original offer was written with everything in it, right? I mean, they asked for the kitchen, you know, literally the kitchen sink, of course, but everything else too. We calculated that seller lost $56,000. Because they didn't have, in this case, any representation. They were listed, and we won't say by who, but they had zero representation, and so therefore we calculated they lost about $56,000.
Thank you, Rhonda.
And that was just really a sad, I mean, you feel, I mean, obviously it's good for your client, but you feel a little bad that the other side is just so underrepresented, right? And they just don't have any good representation. So I would venture that we talk about all the time that setting yourself apart is part of what it takes to be successful in this industry. Because we function in a sea of sameness, right? We are perceived as all AIAs. Everybody thinks that 99% of the agents are just out there to show up, collect their check, and go home and not do anything, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, yes, but I was thinking that it says that 90-some% of the agents are so narcissistic that they don't realize that they're not doing their client justice. That's the sad part of that.
That is kind of the other side of it, right? Is that traditional agent that is all about themselves. Look at me, I'm the greatest.
But they're not.
You want to work with me because I'm the greatest. Well, what about, how's that going to impact me? Like, what's that do for me as your client, right? And that's been a big push lately. That's a shift. And when you work with millennials in particular, they don't really care about you. They don't care about what awards you got or how many blue ribbons you have on your sash. It's all about, so how are you going to help me? Because that's, I mean, why else would I hire you? If you're not going to help me, I don't want to hire you so that you can get another gold star. Like, that doesn't help me, right?
Where's value proposition?
The value proposition, huge. That's what we have to work on. So in a sea of sameness, where we're trying to set ourselves apart from all the rest, if we went in and explained that, well, I charge 5% on my side, and we can do the buyer side, you know, most relatively common to do 3 or 4%, something on that line. But I charge 5% on my side to list the property, market it, and provide you with the full service and negotiation that I do. Would that set you apart?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say.
Now, here's the thing, right?
Now you're going to deliver.
The first step is to set yourself apart.
It would set you right outside the door.
The second step is to now be able to back that up. Now, what's funny is, so that's an extreme example, but I can tell you when I was an agent, I collected 3.5% on my side every single time in a market where 3 was much more common, and there were plenty of people going below that. and I was competing against them. So how do I compete against somebody that's charging 2 or 2.5% and I'm charging 3.5%? How do I do that? How do I not just end up outside the door on the other side, right? What do I do that justifies them paying me more?
It's easier after you're in the door because then you get to prove yourself, but we're talking that first initial.
I mean, we're talking during the appointment, you've got
Yeah.
to
to
set
set
apart.
the expectation that there's a reason why they should pay you more, right? And so it's all about that value proposition. It's all about what do you bring to the table. Now, the reason this all ties into HomeBase is that we're going to utilize HomeBase to help show how we as agents are going to be accountable to them. Because the common agent gives a whole big list of, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this and 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 this. And the client a week later thinks, gosh, I wonder if they did any of that stuff. Did they ever do what they said they were going to do? I've never seen it anywhere. I can't find it online. I don't know what they did. I mean, they said all these great, wonderful things, but I don't understand where all that is, right? And so if you could set that experience during your presentation and say, you know, I would imagine you've talked to a lot of agents, and I would imagine that they've given you a whole list of things that they're going to do to market your property. And I'm going to do the same thing. But here's the difference. The difference is I have a system. This system is kind of like online banking. Do you do online banking? Okay, so remember, you got to know your audience, right? If they switch to no, okay, you got to change your tack, because HomeBase is not a good thing at that point, because if they're not comfortable with doing online transaction management type stuff, this is not a good thing for them. Okay, so know your audience. But assuming that they are modern in any way, I mean, most people do online banking of some sort, or they do online shopping, or they do online something, right? And so you can say to them, let me show you how I'm going to be different, because I'm not just going to tell you I'm going to do all this stuff. I'm going to give you a way to see when I did it and what the results are. Is that something that will help you understand how what we're doing will benefit you and help you get more money in a faster time?
Yeah,
Good.
I don't know. I'm a skeptic.
I know you are. That's why I enjoy you being here.
Well, and everybody's really busy,
Uh-huh.
okay? And nobody likes to do home banking
Uh-huh.
and bill pay.
But
It's something you have to
if
do.
you can do it faster, right, it's good.
So now I've got to learn something new.
Okay, it's not a learn, it's an easy, it's right there.
I know, but I've got to go in and look. Why aren't you calling me every
Okay.
Friday?
So this is not a trump of communication. This is not in place of communication. This is another way for me to show what we're doing with your property. It's not I'm not going to not call you. You still have to set that up, absolutely, and that's a good point. I'm not trying to substitute the update conversation, because to be honest, there's nothing that substitutes for that. No amount of HomeBase Insight emails or showing feedback emails or any of those things will displace the weekly update. Okay, that is a very valid point. But knowing that it's there, I will venture to say that the majority of people will never look.
I agree.
Right? But knowing that they could make a difference. Knowing that they could make it easier. Now, here's the other thing that this all ties back to. Because if you utilize the system, it helps you be more organized and functional as well. So we think about it. We talked about the HomeBase InTouch, which is the managing of prospecting, basically, right? And it reminds you, hey, today, Taylor, you got a call JP, and check in with him about, is he ready to buy yet, because he's waiting on that money to come in, right? HomeBase does the same thing for you with an actual client, a live client, one that is your client at this point, not a prospect. So whether it's a listing, which is kind of the easiest way to use it, or a buyer, okay? With a listing, think about it. How many of you have developed your checklist of things that you do for every listing? You know, we've talked about that. What does it take to market? What does it take to prepare a listing? What does it take to get it together and show it to the world? What does it take to coordinate the showings? What does it take? You know, all the different little steps, right? You have to submit paperwork to this, or put lock boxes, or signs, or order signs, or staging, photography, videography, dollhouse 3D imaging, all that kind of stuff, right? You have a list of all that stuff. So do any of you print out a sheet or have a spreadsheet or have any way that you track that every time you list something?
Yeah, I've got a printout.
Sure,
A few.
Number of
Okay.
lists, yeah.
Okay, and do you go through with your checklist and check it off for every single listing and say, okay, I did that one, I did that one, I did that one?
Flyers done, blah, blah,
Okay.
blah.
Gotcha. All right. So here's the simple shift then. All we're going to do is take that list and put it in there. Okay? And we might not actually get too much into the detail of how this works. We're going to go into the training one real quick, just because we can screw around and do whatever we want. If you aren't aware, this button right here is the training HomeBase, okay? And so literally you can go in there and do whatever you want. You can make up stuff, put in transactions, pretend to do this, that, and the other, because it's not real. And so you're not going to screw anything up. You're not going to set anything up. And you'll notice this is me as an agent when I was in town. I'm still listed in the training thing that way. But I was selling 1441 Dunwoody Village Parkway. Anybody recognize that address?
It's your house.
No, it's our old office.
I
And so
I
I
wasn't
can go
doing
into
that.
that transaction and I can see, give it a second, getting a little slow here this morning.
all systems.
What do you mean this morning?
Yeah, this is particularly.
This is particularly slow at the moment. So you can see I added this morning, I added a packet, single family listings. And in that packet, it added all of these tasks, some of which are mandatory, some of which are optional. And they're all assigned to me as the agent and things that I can go in and do. Now,
What's that return lockbox to office?
yeah, that's a whole return lockbox to office thing. You know, after you sell it, gotta bring it back.
Then I have to get another one.
They have to get another one. So one of the things that you have to take in consideration is when we first launched, I'm going to give you a history of HomeBase. When HomeBase first launched almost 10 years ago, we, the beta testers, developed this whole list of, okay, this has got to be this and this has got to be that. And you got to do this, 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 this. And these are mandatory and these are optional and these are da, 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 right? And we went through and developed this whole thing. Well, how many of you do the exact same thing for a listing? Anybody? I mean, other than having to fill out a contract, a listing agreement, and turn it in, and well, do you always put a lockbox?
Yes.
No.
No.
Dirt doesn't have a place to lock.
Dirt doesn't have a lockbox. There are some special situations where it's appointment only, and you're not going to put a lockbox.
Right.
There are situations there you're not going to put a lockbox. Just all those kinds of things. What we found is that every single agent practices just slightly different. And so we ran into all kinds of problems by trying to say, okay, this is what you have to do for a listing. And so I want you to do all of these things because it just didn't kind of work out that way. And then it ran into problems of not being able to close out transactions and things because tasks weren't done and all that sort of thing. So now we don't actually put any task. When the staff puts in your listing and they assign a document packet to it, they don't have any task associated with that. because unless you choose to utilize it for that, we're not going to. Now, what we can do is if you give us your list of these are the things I want to do for every listing, or maybe you have a couple of different ones. Maybe you have a standard level and a luxury level, or maybe you have a condo and a single family. Maybe you have dirt and regular residential, or different things. We can put those in as packets so that all you have to do to add them is go into your transaction, click packet, and then select the one. Now the single family one is already attached, and so I'm not going to add these others, but they can all be here for you to attach them, and they will effectively put in whatever documents or tasks.
How do you create a packet?
We create the packet for you.
Okay.
Okay, so you just give us the list of what you want to be in the packet, and we will build it for you and put it in there.
Can we also do an edit whereby we want to add a specific task to a specific
So you can
listing?
add a task. The only thing the packet does is kind of group add everything. Okay, so the packet can add document placeholders, it can add tasks, it can add all kinds of things, right? And so it's kind of okay, so for every single family home that you list, I want these things and these things. Okay, boom. And so they're all there. But if you want to add a task individually, you can just go in and add a task, and you can choose a library or you can add a new one. So if you choose from the library, there are a bunch of different ones like schedule inspection, and then hit go, and you pick. Now, this is the fun part about the task, okay? There might be some task on your list that you want to keep track of, but you wouldn't want your client to see, okay? And so in that case, you can put in here who can see what, and whether they can, whether they have any connection to it whatsoever. You can also set alerts for it so that it will remind you when it's due. So for instance, if you wanted, that, okay, I'm going to connect with Savage every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Because that's my weekly update communication time.
Do you get that through email?
You can set it in here to, you can do text to mobile too.
Oh, okay.
So you can do the different channels. You can even have it fax you
What's the price?
a recurring reminder if you want it. And then if you go under association, you can see if there are any documents that would be associated with that thing. And then you can, of course, always add comments and things to it if you like. And so you just, put in here, you can put on a date, you can make mandatory or optional, you can make due dates and all that kind of stuff. I'm a little zoomed, so I can't quite, whoops, too far. Too far, stop it. So we'll just X that out. So, and you can go into any one of these and do the same thing, okay? And modify them, change, this task has to be completed within 2 days after the listing date. So you can do things subsequent and stack things, and it can get relatively complex if you want it to. Now the fun part is once you set it up, it's there, and you just click add and boom, you're done. Now, I've mentioned the having your clients see it. To date, how many of you have invited one of your clients into HomeBase? You have?
Yeah.
Excellent.
I've done more.
Excellent. Not a rampant thing, because people are afraid to have people see behind the iron curtain, right?
Green.
Green curtain. Sorry, iron curtain, green curtain, whatever. But if you look down here under parties, we'll see what's in this one. 'Cause it's a party.
Pete's not there anymore.
You can see that, so Tim is the seller. If I press the invite button, it will invite him in. And he will be able to see the documents that he's allowed to see that would be relative to him. So listing agreement, purchase and sale agreement, all that kind of stuff. HUD, well, not anymore. CDF, no, because we won't have that most likely. So we'll have some alternate closing form. But anyway, you invite them in and they can see stuff. They get messages through here. How many of you use your regular email, or worse, a personal email, to communicate something like, you know, Mr. Buyer, we've talked about you really need to get a survey for this property because it's the way it sits and it looks, you know, I know you want to put a fence in the backyard. You might I would highly recommend you get a survey before closing. If you send that through your personal email, 6 months down the road, they come back and go before a judge, because that's what we always measure everything by. If you go before a judge, can you defend yourself? And if you use your personal email and something happened and it's deleted, it's gone, you can't find it, you can't prove that it was ever sent, and they come back and they just keep going on and on about how, you know, my agent never told me that I needed a survey, that was an issue. If you've done it in here through the messaging system, you can send and receive messages that will stay with the file forever and ever.
Can you delete them?
But you and I use Google.
I personally use Google.
I do too. And so if you're doing a transaction and you have a, what do they call it? Not a folder, but a label.
Okay.
So I put a label,
Mm-hmm.
Duffy.
Yep.
So I got stuff over here, and got stuff over there. I want it all, I want it
hear
all
you.
together.
So my argument would be that the problem is the security of that system, because we all know that those systems get hacked, and they have over and over and over again. That's why you get spam stuff and God knows all kinds of other crap. This one is less likely to be messed. And so if it's really important, if it's just chit chat, then fine, just email or text or whatever might be fine. But if you're trying to make sure that you have a record of communication, for instance, if you were to say, okay, we want to do a price reduction, if you were to use this system, you would never have to worry about, well, where did it go?
But we get stuff coming in that's important that we don't generate, like an appraisal report, an inspection report.
It goes in here.
How do we get it in there?
So 2 ways. You can go into documents and you can add a document.
And I can add it from, okay.
So if you have it as a PDF on your system, the other thing you can do is forward it to the HomeBase email for the office, and the staff will put it in. And just in the email say, which is part of the benefit of being with the company, is that you don't have to do everything yourself. So if you get, and here's what I would recommend, when you get that inspection report, when you get that addendum, when you get that, all of those different things that you get, just forward a copy to HomeBase, and the staff will put it in, and just put a note, you know, hey, this is the preliminary, please add to the file. Because what'll happen is, and these are all empty because it's a test one, but what'll happen is, see, these are empty. So say there's an amendment to remove inspection contingency. Now, on most transactions, does the first amendment to remove inspection contingency get signed by all parties, or do you have to go back and forth?
Well, I will never remove the contingency.
Well, it's at the end. It's the, let's say, amendment to address concerns. This is old. I mean, most likely the buyer's going to write one up and send it to the seller, and the seller's probably not going to want to do everything on it, so they're going to send an alternate version back to the buyer, and the buyer might be okay with what they cut off. They might want to add something back. You know what I'm saying, right? They're going to go back and forth, okay? So now you have multiple versions. Do you have a record of that? And here you would, because what happens is we add in an amendment to address concerns. The first one that the buyer sent over. Now the seller does one, we send that over and we send that one in. That becomes version 2. We get the third one, the buyer sends over, the seller finally accepts it, signs it, it's all signed. Now version 3 comes in. So we keep version 1, 2, 3, but version 3 is the only one that really shows. So when the client comes in to look at it, they're going to see just version 3 because that's the one that applies, right? The others don't matter. Well, unless you need some historical context, they might matter.
Yeah.
And so now we have those there. And we can go back in and see versions 1 and 2 if we need to for something. Okay? And so that's very helpful for that kind of process. If you think about it, if you printed out everything that happens in a transaction, right? I mean, massive files. What about when you go out and show a buyer? Let's flip from listings to buyers. When you go out and show a buyer properties, do you take notes on the little agent printouts? Like, do you make notes of, I hated this one? Yeah, FMLS sheets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, the MLS printouts. You know, do you take notes of hated this one, liked this one, didn't like the backyard, whatever random things that, you know, may have happened? Door wouldn't close, had to call the agent. Whatever.
Door wouldn't open.
Door wouldn't open, had to call the agent.
Lights don't
Alarm
go
went
on.
off, even though there was no indication there was an alarm. Had to call the agent.
Man in the shower.
Man in the shower had to call the agent.
Teenagers making love in the upstairs bedroom.
Had to call
And
the
there's-
agent.
Had to call the agent. If you were to scan those in when you got back to the office or to your home office or wherever, if you were to scan them in and send them to HomeBase, we could put them in. And that would keep those. Then you could toss that and not have to worry about anything. Now, how many of you have sold every buyer you've ever worked with after the first trip out? Okay, anybody else? No?
Couple of times.
A couple times, but not everyone, right? And so now you're on trip number 3 or 5 or 50, and another client and you. I would never make it to 50, but there are people that do.
I made it 40 and got fired.
I would have fired myself around trip.
I was getting ready to fire him.
So you can upload those in over and over and over again and keep track of everything. Because now what happens if they fire you after trip number 40 and they go back and buy the property you showed them on trip number 2?
How do you do that though? I mean, if you send it to HomeBase
How do you
and
search
it's a
for it?
prospect, I mean, how do you
So
label
here's
it
the
in
thing.
subject?
If you have a buyer brokerage with someone, they are a client. We can create a transaction for them.
Okay.
Okay? And we don't necessarily need to have the address until the final thing. So like with relocation, we do that all the time.
Okay.
A transferee comes in that's a buyer, relocation goes in and creates a transaction that doesn't have an address because
You don't know.
they don't know yet. But it has all of the other relocation paperwork that has to be in there, right? So we do the same thing with yours. So we can put the buyer brokerage in there, we can put in the disclosure packets that you gave them, you can put in the showing sheets and feedbacks and ideal home sheet worksheets they filled out and whatever else you utilize to work with your client. And you can still leverage the system to work with them and manage the process. Now, from that standpoint, you might have tasks set up for a buyer that are more once we go under contract specific, right? Might be, okay, so now that we're under contract, we need to schedule this and schedule this and do this and do this. And that will help them know what they need to do, right? And now you're justifying your value for a buyer side of the transaction. So my general comment is this. The more organized you are, the more you can show your client that you are working for them and you don't just show up at the closing to collect your check, the higher the commission you can charge, and the easier your business will be.
And less your liability is.
And it reduces your liability, right? Because your commission will go to zero real fast when somebody sues you and takes it from you. If you get sued and get a penalty, you might end up owing money on a transaction. I've seen that happen. That's not fun. If I collect $5,000 and I owe you 10, I gotta find another job, right?
Question, we talked about you can fax things in and get them into the system.
Email.
If we have this email account and another one, it becomes difficult for clients to recognize which one they're supposed to be going to. And you want it in the HomeBase and they send it into another email account. Is there a way to forward that email into this account so you can track it?
In theory, I'm not I don't think so. Because what's going to happen is when you send a message, so like if I do a new message here, it's going to allow me to pick who I'm sending it to and give me a subject and a message, and then it's going to send a notification email to the party that it's being sent to that it's in the system. And most often it'll have the content, assuming it's not extreme.
I suppose you
it should
print
show up.
the email.
You could print it and scan it
just
in if you
fax it
needed
in
it
there.
to. But there's no real, you can't email into, the message center is secure within the system. It has external notification, but it's not sending the email, it's not sending the message from this system to their email. It's notifying their email, but it's really just going inside the system between the parties. So yeah, there's no way to kind of do that. But again, it's, it depends on the client. Some clients I've seen have been like giddy to be able to log in the system and they can see the documents and you can message there and all that sort of stuff. And that's them managing this transaction. That's them staying on top of what they need to stay on top of in the transaction. And then some clients are not so interested. And that's okay. But the pretty thing for you is that you will have that stuff there in the future when they need it. So when somebody calls 2 years from now because they're trying to argue their taxes and they want a copy of their closing statement, it's right there. And you can send it right from there. Okay? Utilize the system to its fullest and you will be more organized, be able to do more business. But if you really utilize it where you're connecting with your client with it, I mean, how many of you done the digital listing presentation? It's free to ask. Okay. In the digital listing presentation, there's a video about HomeBase, right? And it's a fun little, we create a personal blah, 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 right? If you show that to your client and then you don't invite them into their personal portal that you created for them,
Whoops.
what have you just done? You've just lied to them, right? You just said, hey, I'm going to offer you this great service. Psych. No, I'm not, because I don't use it, because I don't know how. It even says you should work with a Coldwell Banker agent that utilizes this system. And they should, because it's a good system for them. One of the most frustrating things in working with clients is they need answers when they need answers, whether you're available to answer them or not, right? That's that immediate response thing, right? At 11 o'clock at night, they text you.
Flash bang.
And you got to pop right to it, right? Well, not if you're asleep, right? If you're asleep, you're not likely to respond. But they're in a panic because in their mind, they think due diligence ends tonight. And it is now 11 o'clock. They think it ends in less than an hour, and they are totally freaking out. They can go into HomeBase, log in if you've invited them, and look at the beautiful little important date sheet that you put in there, because I recommend you do that on all of them. Keep track, everybody keep on par. That way nobody's saying, well, do I count today as 1 or is tomorrow 1? That's my favorite.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow's 1. Because if we did a 1-day due diligence, it wouldn't end today, right?
You don't even have a total date.
That would be 0. And that actually there is no way to make it in tonight. It has to end tomorrow night. There's no way. If you put 0, you don't have any. If you put 1, it's tomorrow.
Except on Friday, that's 3.
Well, with the way our contract is written, yes.
If you have a special stip.
If that special stip is in there. And so, utilize that to give people the options. They may not want them. They may say, I don't really, I trust you, I'm fine. I don't want to look at other stuff. I don't want to bother. It's a new system. I don't want to learn, whatever. But just knowing they have the option to kind of check up on you, make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Here's the other just kind of, at the moment, I am in the process of trying to lose weight.
Sorry.
What the number one thing that I've gotten out of my calls with, as I call them, my fat coach, is, yes, I know it's what I need for my mentality to work. So I work with my fat coach. My fat coach tells me, do you track? Do you track your weight on a daily basis? Do you track what you eat? Do you track how much activity you do? Do you track how much water you drink? And they got me tracking all kinds of things. But is it not true that if we track something, we pay more attention to it, right? I can't tell you, my average steps per day, I'm like all about getting that number to go up and up and up. Because it's like, I just can't not, right? It's the compulsion to make sure that, well, I don't want this month to be less than last month. I gotta make sure my average daily step count is higher. With my little tracker, right? We track everything.
Yeah.
And so I will venture to say to you that if you put together your trackable list of activities, the high performance, high function, high service list, make it good. Don't make it minimal. Make it good and inclusive. Just by having that list and knowing that the client might see it will make you function at a higher level. And on some level, your clients know that. So for them, knowing that they have the ability to check and see, okay, he said he was going to do this then, makes them know that you're more likely to do it because they can check up on you. They don't have to necessarily for that to work.
But if they did.
But if they did and you didn't, you'd feel crappy, right? And you might lose a client, which is why so many agents are afraid to use the system. Don't be afraid, step up. Be better than AIA. Okay? Questions? I haven't shown you a ton of detail, but a little bit.
Yes, enough.
I mean, the actual use of the system is just kind of you getting in there and working with it.
Yeah.
I do have a question. So anything that we send into HomeBase is going to automatically be put in here, or do we have to?
Give a little direction in the email if it's not a normal like contract or basic type thing that we would know what to do with.
Okay.
We can put anything in that you send us. Now remember, when you email something, and that kind of goes back to your comment, Will, about the email that you got, you cannot just forward that email to the HomeBase email and have us put it in, because that system is designed for document delivery. So it has to be an attachment. If it's not a PDF attachment,
But we can just hit
can't.
add and upload it ourselves.
But
In theory, yes.
Okay.
but if we had like an appraisal
In theory.
or an inspection report,
Correct.
and it was an attachment from the inspector,
Yes, you can forward that
then we can
email.
forward that.
You can
to
forward that because it has an attachment,
Dunwoody CB, whatever.
and you send it to the office HomeBase in-doc thing, and then one of the staff will process it and put it in. Now, if it's not what I would ask, remember, we are people, right? And so make our lives easier too. Don't make us have to like try to investigate to figure out where this is supposed to go
No, I
and what it
understand
is.
that, yeah.
So in your email that you forward, try to make sure the subject is the address. Try to put in the comment, you know, here's the appraisal, please put it, you know, whatever. Okay, and that'll make it a little easier for us to manage, because that's the other thing is all of the staff, which is kind of cool about this system, is, you know, used to back in the day when we did everything by paper, well, you deliver stuff all over the office and drop things in different boxes and whatever. This, it all goes to one spot and we can all see it. And so any one of us can pop in there and process whatever's there, assuming we can process whatever's there.
Your vast staff.
Our vast staff that we have here, it's more staff than the average office, that's for sure.
2, really?
3,
Count you.
4 counting me.
Oh,
You
well,
don't count
Deborah.
the front. She does stuff too. So we all do, you know, we all do what we need to do when we need to. And so that's why if you can give a little direction, it just makes it easier for us to know.
What, speaking of the subject line, what are the pertinent things? I mean, you said the address, which we all put in there, but should it be like address and our last name or something, or does our name even need to be in there? Just
If you put the
address?
address, we'll be able to find the
Okay.
transaction. It's,
Okay.
you know, remember in HomeBase, when you're looking for stuff, if you're here under the search, if you just put in, you know, 123 for Main Street, it's going to search and find it. Obviously, it's not because it's not in there, but you literally, all we need is the address, and that way we can find it.
And if you don't have an address, then you can put a person's
And then
name.
if, so then
Fire
that's the
worker
other
or-
thing, right? So if you're dealing with a buyer client that we haven't put an address to yet, then put their last name, you know, buyer Jones or whatever. And that way we can search, because you can also search by agent last name, or if you go into the transaction search, we can search by client last name as well. Okay. Any questions? Any other questions? Thoughts? All right. Awesome. Thank you guys for coming. And I hope to have some people inviting more people into the system,
I
right?
had one viewer.
Yay. Other people.